There are stories whispered around campfires, stories that should never be taken lightly. Some call them legends, others call them warnings. But those who have seen her, who have heard her sorrowful cries echo through the wilderness, know the truth. She is real. And she is still searching. It was a quiet summer evening when the Thompson family set up camp near Yellowstone's Shoshone Lake, a beautiful, remote spot far from the usual tourist trails, perfect for those seeking solitude. Jason and Emily Thompson, along with their 2 young children, had planned this trip for months. A chance to disconnect from the chaos of city life, to immerse themselves in the beauty of the park, to enjoy a few nights beneath the endless Wyoming sky. The first evening was peaceful. They roasted marshmallows, shared stories, and watched as the last light of day faded over the treetops. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and the distant murmur of water lapping against the lake's shore. But as night settled in, something changed. The atmosphere shifted. The air grew heavy. And then, a sound. Software, almost imperceptible at first. A woman's voice, weeping. Jason turned to Emily. "Did you hear that?" Emily frowned, listening. A faint, mournful sob drifted through the trees, low, heartbroken, desperate. Jason scanned the darkness beyond their firelight, but the forest was empty. "Maybe it's an animal," Emily suggested, though her voice lacked conviction. They tried to ignore it, but as the night dragged on, the weeping continued, and it was getting closer. The family retreated to their tent, zipping themselves inside, the thin fabric suddenly feeling far too fragile. But sleep did not come easily. The crying persisted, rising and falling, sometimes distant, sometimes near. Then the whispers began. A voice, hushed and sorrowful, weaving through the trees. "Mis niños, ¿dónde están mis niños?" Jason's blood turned to ice. Emily clutched his arm, eyes wide in the dim glow of their flashlight. "It's Spanish," she whispered. "She's saying, 'My children. Where are my children?'" Their youngest 5-year-old Lily whimpered in her sleeping bag. "I don't like her," she mumbled. Jason held his breath, straining to listen. The whispers. They were inside the tent, right by his ear. "Donde están?" The flashlight flickered, and the tent collapsed. Jason scrambled, kicking at the fabric, fighting against the sudden weight pressing down on them. Outside, the fire had gone out, and the weeping had turned to wailing. A long, soul-crushing cry that made the trees tremble. The vanishing items. By morning, the campsite was in shambles. The tent, once secured, had partially collapsed. Their supplies had been scattered. And strangest of all, several of their belongings were missing. Jason's watch, Emily's locket, Lily's stuffed rabbit, her favorite toy, gone. Jason searched the area, looking for tracks, any sign of an animal intrusion. There were none, just the wet footprints, leading from the lake, right to their tent. The second night. A terrible mistake. They should have left. Everything in their bones told them to pack up and go. But they didn't. They convinced themselves it had been the wind, an overactive imagination, some logical explanation they were too tired to see. So they stayed. And the second night was worse. The moment the sun dipped below the horizon, the forest fell unnaturally silent. No crickets, no rustling leaves, just a deafening stillness. Then a splash, as if something heavy had just entered the lake. Jason stepped outside the tent, flashlight in hand, scanning the water's edge. Ripples moved across the surface, and then she rose, a figure in the mist, dressed in tattered white, soaked and dripping, her long black hair clinging to her face, her arms outstretched, reaching. Jason stumbled back, heart hammering. Emily, get the kids, we're leaving. But before they could move, she screamed, a piercing, inhuman wail that shattered the night. Jason felt it deep in his bones, an unbearable sorrow mixed with something far more sinister. And in that moment, he understood. She was searching for her children. For her children, and she would take theirs if they did not leave. They fled, threw everything into the car, left the tent behind, didn't stop driving until they reached a motel miles away. And even then, Lily whispered in the dark. She was so sad, Daddy. Jason pulled her close. I know, baby. She just wanted her kids back. Jason didn't know what to say, but deep down, he knew one thing: she was still out there, still searching, still weeping. Days later, Jason researched the area, and what he found made his blood run cold. A story. An old tale of a woman who had lived near the lake long ago. A mother who had lost her children to the water. Some say they drowned. Others say something took them. And in her grief, she wandered the shores, calling for them, night after night, until she, too, disappeared beneath the waves. But she never left. She lingers, crying, searching, and if you hear her weeping in the night, do not answer, do not look, do not stay, or you may just find yourself lost to the lake forever. There are things in this world we are not meant to understand. Some call them spirits, some believe they are omens, and some, the unlucky ones, have followed them, only to find themselves lost in a place where time and reality begin to unravel. This is what happened to 4 campers deep in the back country of Yellowstone. And they were lucky to make it out at all. It started as a simple trip, 4 friends looking to escape the stress of daily life. Scott, Vanessa, Brian, and Elise had planned their adventure for months. They weren't amateurs. They had camping experience, survival knowledge, and top-tier equipment. Their route was carefully mapped, leading them to an isolated clearing surrounded by thick ancient pines, away from civilization, away from distractions. Just the 4 of them and the wild, or so they thought. The first day was perfect. The air was fresh, the forest alive with birdsong and rustling leaves. They hiked, fished, and set up camp with ease. As the sun dipped below the treetops, they gathered around the fire, watching the stars emerge one by one in the clear night sky. Then, Scott noticed them first. At first, he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. Small, glowing orbs of light flickering between the trees just beyond their campsite. They were blue, then white, then shifting to a deep, unnatural green, soft and pulsing, like slow-moving fireflies. But these lights were not fireflies. They were too large, too deliberate. They floated in synchronized patterns, weaving through the trees like dancers in the night. "Do you see that?" Scott whispered. The others turned, and the moment they did, the lights stopped, hanging motionless in the air as if they were watching. An uneasy silence settled over the group. Then, as suddenly as they had appeared, the lights vanished. They should have left then. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. The next night, the lights returned, this time closer. They flickered between the trees, moving with an intelligence that sent shivers down Vanessa's spine. "I don't like this," she muttered, pulling her jacket tighter around her. "There too, coordinated." Brian scoffed. "It's probably just bioluminescent insects or gas from the ground." But the way the lights moved, it was calculated. Scott stood, stepping toward the tree line. And then one of the orbs drifted closer, hovering, beckoning. "Elise," Scott said, his voice oddly distant. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Vanessa grabbed his arm. "Don't." The light pulsed, sending a ripple of cold air through the campsite. For a moment, Scott's pupils dilated, his body swaying as if he were falling into some kind of trance. Then, the fire snapped. The spell broke. The lights receded back into the trees, disappearing into the darkness. Scott gasped, stumbling back. "What the hell was that?" Elise whispered. Nobody had an answer, but that was only the beginning. The third night, the lights came again. More of them this time. Dozens. Weaving, flickering, circling the trees in mesmerizing, rhythmic patterns. Brian, against all logic, pulled out his phone. "I'm going to record this," he said, stepping toward the lights. The moment he crossed the tree line, everything changed. The world shifted. One moment, they were standing at the edge of camp. The next, they were somewhere else. The fire was gone. The tent was gone. The stars above were wrong, shifted into unfamiliar constellations. And, worst of all, their watches read 3:42 a.m. But just minutes ago, it had been 9:30 p.m. They had lost 6 hours, and none of them could remember what had happened. The footprints that weren't theirs. Panic set in. They scrambled through the woods, trying to orient themselves, to find their way back to camp. Then, Vanessa froze. "Look at the ground," she whispered. Footprints, hundreds of them, but they weren't their own, and they weren't human. Elise let out a choked breath. "What? What is that?" The prints were elongated, narrow, wrong, like something had been pacing around them while they were unconscious, something that wasn't human. Scott turned in a circle, his breath quick and shallow. "Where the hell is the campsite?" They should have been right next to it, but instead, they were miles away, and they had no memory of how they got there. At dawn, they finally stumbled back to their original camp. Everything was exactly as they had left it, as if they had never been gone. Except for one thing. A symbol had been drawn into the dirt near the fire pit, a circle with an intricate pattern of lines and curves, almost like a warning or a mark. Scott shuddered. "I don't think we were supposed to see them." They packed up immediately, leaving behind whatever answers the lights might have held. And as they drove back toward civilization, they stopped at a small general store near the park's entrance. The old woman behind the counter eyed them as they walked in. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said. Vanessa hesitated, then asked, "Have you ever heard of strange lights in the forest?" The woman's expression darkened. Her voice was quiet when she spoke. "People say they're spirits. Others say they're something older, something worse." Scott swallowed. "What happens if you follow them?" The woman's gaze sharpened. "You don't," she said. Then, after a long pause, "You were lucky this time." Vanessa frowned. "This time?" The woman didn't answer, just turned away, muttering under her breath, as if she knew something they didn't, something they weren't meant to survive. To this day, none of them know what happened during those lost hours. They still dream of the lights, of the whispers that called to them from the trees, of the footprints that didn't belong to any creature they could explain. And if you ever find yourself deep in Yellowstone's backcountry, if you see the lights weaving through the trees, do not follow them. Because once you do, you might never find your way back. Deep in the heart of Yellowstone National Park, beyond the well-traveled paths, beyond the safety of the ranger outposts, stands an old, forgotten ranger station. It hasn't been used in decades. Left to rot in the wilderness, overtaken by moss, its windows clouded with time. Most rangers know to stay away. Some say it's cursed. Some say it's just another relic of the past. But for one unfortunate team of rangers, the past didn't stay buried. Because inside that abandoned station, sitting in the dust and silence, they found the doll. And nothing was ever the same again. It was early autumn when Ranger Matt and his team stumbled upon the station. They had been surveying the backcountry after reports of a collapsed bridge, charting alternative routes for hikers. The terrain was unforgiving, but after hours of trekking through dense underbrush, they came upon the building. It was smaller than expected, just a single-story structure with a sagging roof and rusted hinges. The door was slightly ajar, creaking in the wind. Matt hesitated. "I thought all the old stations were cleared out years ago." "They were," Ranger Jess muttered. "This one's not even on our maps." Something about that felt wrong. Still, curiosity won. Inside, the air was thick with dust, the wooden floors warped from decades of neglect. Old papers and maps were scattered on a rotting desk. A rusted lantern hung from the ceiling, unmoving despite the wind outside. And then they saw it, sitting perfectly upright in the center of the room. A dollar. It was old, its fabric body yellowed with age. Its dress was tattered, a pale shade of what might have once been pink. But it was the face that sent a chill through the group. Glass eyes, too large, stared blankly forward. The skin was cracked porcelain, lips frozen in an unsettling half-smile. It shouldn't have been there. It shouldn't have been watching. Matt exhaled sharply. "That's weird." Jess stepped closer, peering down at the doll. "Looks antique. Maybe someone left it behind when the station was abandoned." Ranger Kyle scoffed. "Yeah, because leaving a doll sitting in the middle of an empty building isn't creepy at all." Nobody wanted to touch it, but as the sun started dipping below the trees, the air inside the station grew colder. A deep, unnatural chill seeped into the wooden walls. "Let's head back," Matt finally said. "We'll mark the station's location and report it later." The others agreed, but as they turned to leave, a sound. Software. Barely audible. A quiet, distant giggle. They froze. The hair on the back of Matt's neck stood on end. "Did you hear that?" Jess whispered. Nobody answered, because there was no one else there, and the doll's head had shifted, just slightly, but enough. That night they set up camp a good distance from the station. The fire was warm, the food familiar, but the unease never faded. And then, at exactly 3:12 a.m., Jess screamed. Matt scrambled out of his tent, heart hammering. Jess was standing, breathing hard, flashlight clutched tight in her shaking hands. What happened? She didn't speak, just pointed. And there, sitting upright in the middle of their campfire ring, was the doll. Exactly as they had left it in the station. Glass eyes locked onto them. Kyle swore under his breath. No way. We left that thing back there." Matt rushed forward, grabbing the doll. It was ice cold, like it had been left out in the snow for hours. He didn't hesitate. He hurled it into the fire. The flames licked around the fabric body, curling black around the porcelain face. For a moment, they swore they heard a whisper. Then, silence. It was gone. Or so they thought. At dawn, they packed up, eager to put distance between themselves and the station. But as they neared the ranger outpost, something stopped them cold. Sitting on the porch, pristine, untouched, as if it had never been burned, was the doll. Its glass eyes watching, waiting. Matt took a step back, stomach twisting. This isn't possible. Jess reached for her radio, but the static was deafening, piercing, and unnatural. And just beneath it a soft giggle, faint, but unmistakable. They turned to the outpost ranger, an older man named Don, hoping for answers. But the moment he saw the doll, his face drained of color. "You found it," he murmured. Matt's throat tightened. "You know about this?" Don exhaled slowly. "There used to be a family of rangers stationed out here, back in the 1930s. The youngest daughter had a doll just like this." He hesitated. "She disappeared one night. They searched everywhere, never found a trace." Jess swallowed hard. "And the doll?" Don's eyes were dark with something unreadable. They say it showed up days later, sitting in the middle of camp. Kyle shuddered. What did they do with it? Don's expression was grim. They burned it. A heavy silence settled over them. And then? Matt asked. Don sighed. The next morning, it was back. Some things should stay buried. They locked the doll in the storage unit that night. By morning, it was gone, and none of them ever spoke of it again. To this day, deep in the backcountry of Yellowstone, the old ranger station still stands. Dust-covered, forgotten, but not empty. And if you ever find yourself near its decaying walls, if you hear a soft giggle in the night, if you see something small sitting in the darkness, staring, leave it alone. Because some things refuse to be left behind. Some things in Yellowstone can be explained. Natural formations, weather phenomena, the quiet shifting of the land itself. But then there are the things that shouldn't be there. Things that don't belong to the world we know. For Ranger Daniel, that realization came too late. Because once you've seen your own reflection break the rules of reality, there's no going back. It started with a storm. Daniel had been stationed at the East Entrance Ranger Station, one of the park's older posts. Built back in the early 1900s, it had been modernized over the years, but still retained its old-world charm. Thick wooden beams, a stone fireplace, and a bathroom mirror older than any of the rangers who worked there. That mirror was where it all began. The storm had rolled in fast that evening, dark clouds swallowing the last of the sunlight. Rain lashed against the windows, and the station's old generator flickered once, twice, before steadying. Daniel wasn't fazed. Storms were common. He went about his usual routine, log reports, equipment checks, making sure the emergency radios were fully functional. When he stepped into the bathroom to wash his face, he barely glanced at the mirror. Until he noticed something strange. His reflection moved a fraction of a second too late. At first, he thought it was a trick of the light. Maybe exhaustion was messing with him. But when he reached up to rub his eyes, he froze. Because his reflection didn't move. It just stood there, staring back. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. Slowly, cautiously, he lowered his hand. A second later, the reflection did the same. Just late enough to be noticeable. The storm outside seemed to grow louder, wind howling through the trees. The air in the station felt different now, thicker, heavier. Daniel took a step back. So did the reflection. He lifted his arm, deliberate, slow. This time, the reflection copied him perfectly. Relief flooded him. Just my imagination. But when he turned to leave, his reflection kept watching. A chill ran down his spine. He turned back quickly. His reflection was normal. Or was it? Daniel leaned in closer. The face staring back at him was his, but something was wrong. The eyes. They looked too hollow. Like the reflection wasn't just mimicking him anymore. It was studying him. A deep unease settled in his gut. Then, just as he reached for the light switch, the reflection smiled. Daniel hadn't smiled. His stomach dropped. He bolted from the bathroom, heart hammering. For the rest of the night, Daniel avoided the bathroom. He tried to focus on his work, tried to push the thought of that wrong smile out of his head. But the unease never left. The storm eventually passed, leaving behind an eerie stillness. The kind of silence that feels like something is waiting. Finally, as dawn approached, he forced himself to check again. He stepped into the bathroom. The mirror was intact. His reflection looked normal. Daniel exhaled slowly, almost laughing at himself. Just a trick of exhaustion. But as he turned away, a sound cracked through the silence, a deep, splintering shatter. He spun back. The mirror had split down the center. Jagged cracks ran through the glass, distorting his reflection into something grotesque. And yet, through the fractured shards, his reflection was still watching. And it wasn't broken. Daniel didn't stay. He left the station as soon as his shift was over, refusing to look back. The next ranger on duty, Mark, was confused by Daniel's urgency when he warned him, "Don't look in the mirror." Mark just laughed it off. But the next night, the mirror was perfect. Not a single crack. Like it had never been broken at all. But Daniel knew. Some things in Yellowstone don't break. Some things refuse to be shattered. And some things are watching from the other side. There are places in Yellowstone that shouldn't exist. Places that appear only when they want to be found. Ranger Cole learned this the hard way, because deep in the woods, beyond the trails, beyond the maps, there was a town that should not have been there. And when he went back to find it, it was gone. Cole had been a ranger for nearly a decade. He knew every official path, every hidden landmark, every backcountry shortcut. So when he took a routine patrol through the dense forest near the western boundary of the park, he didn't expect anything unusual. The sun was starting to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows through the towering pines. He followed an old game trail, moving deeper than usual. That's when he saw the road. It was an old dirt path, almost overgrown, leading somewhere deeper into the woods. But here's the thing. There were no roads in this part of the park. At least, none that should have still existed. Curiosity got the better of him. He followed it. The trees thinned out, and suddenly he was standing on the edge of a town. Wooden buildings, small and simple, lined a narrow main street. A general store, a diner, a post office. Everything looked old, but intact. It wasn't abandoned. At least, it shouldn't have been, because there were signs of life. A bicycle leaned against the wall of the diner. A rocking chair swayed slightly on a front porch. A clothesline was strung between two buildings, faded shirts and pants hanging stiff in the breeze. But there was no one, not a single person. The silence was thick, pressing against him like the air before a storm. Cole took a cautious step forward. Something felt wrong. His boots crunched on the dirt road, the only sound in the entire town. And that's when he saw them. The figures. They stood in doorways, on porches, in windows. At first, his brain refused to understand what he was looking at. They were human-shaped, but not human. Mannequins. Their glassy eyes stared blankly. Their arms were posed in awkward positions. Some reaching, some holding objects, some tilted slightly, as if whispering to one another. Cole's skin crawled. They weren't new. Their clothes were old-fashioned, faded, stiff, like they'd been sitting there for years. He took a step back. The mannequins didn't move, but something in the diner did. Through the dusty glass of the diner's window, he caught a flicker of movement inside. A shadow, someone, or something, was there. His hand went instinctively to his radio. Static. No signal. The sun was sinking lower. The shadows in the town stretched longer. That's when he noticed something else. The mannequins had moved, just slightly, but they were no longer in the exact same positions as before. Cold fear gripped his spine. A door creaked somewhere down the street. And then, footsteps. Not his own. Someone was walking toward him. Cole didn't wait to see who or what it was. He turned and ran. His boots pounded against the ground, lungs burning as he sprinted back the way he came. Branches tore at his arms. The trees blurred past him, but the road was gone. There was no opening in the trees anymore, only thick, unbroken forest. Panic surged through him. He turned in circles, scanning the trees, trying to find the path he had taken. Nothing. Behind him, The town was silent again. The mannequins stood frozen, their empty eyes watching. And then, the streetlights flickered on. Cole didn't stay to see what happened next. He bolted into the woods, crashing through branches, running blindly until his legs gave out. And when he finally stopped, the town was gone. Cole made it back to the ranger station just before nightfall, breathless and shaken. He reported what he saw, but when a search team was sent out the next morning, there was nothing. No town, no road, no signs that anything had ever been there, just untouched forest. But Cole knew what he had seen, and sometimes, when he patrolled that side of the park, he swore he could still hear something. A creaking, rocking chair, a flicker of movement in the trees, and the distant, ghostly glow of streetlights that shouldn't exist. There are places in Yellowstone that feel older than time itself. Places that hum with something unseen, something that lingers in the walls, in the floors, in the very ground beneath your feet. Ranger Evan didn't believe in ghost stories, but when he moved into the old cabin at the edge of the park, that belief changed. Because beneath that cabin, hidden in the dark, something was waiting. The cabin had been empty for years. It was one of the older ranger outposts built decades ago, long before the park had modernized. The structure was solid, thick wooden beams, a stone fireplace, a simple but sturdy foundation. Evan had been assigned there for a few months, isolated, sure, but functional. At first, everything seemed normal, until the noises started. At night, when the fire had burned low and the wind rattled the trees outside, Evan would hear it. A faint, scratching sound. Not mice, not settling wood. Something deeper. Something coming from beneath the floorboards. Evan searched the cabin for the source. At first, he found nothing. But then, behind an old shelving unit pushed against the back wall, he found the door. It was small, almost invisible, built seamlessly into the floorboards. A hatch, secured with 3 rusted iron latches. Something about it felt wrong, like it was meant to be kept shut. Evan hesitated. The air felt colder near the door. The wood around it looked different, scratched, like something had clawed at it. And then, a thud from below. A slow, deliberate sound, like something was waiting. Evan had seen his fair share of strange things in the wilderness, but nothing prepared him for what lay beneath the cabin. When he finally unlatched the rusted bolts and pried the door open, a rush of cold, stale air hit him. A wooden staircase led down into darkness. His flashlight cut through the black, illuminating stone walls. Damp, uneven, ancient. The basement was larger than expected, almost like it had been carved into the earth itself. And the walls, they were covered in scratches, deep, jagged claw marks, layer upon layer gouged into the stone. They weren't old, they were fresh. Evan's breath came short, his pulse hammering in his ears. The marks on the walls weren't random. They formed patterns, symbols, spirals, crude figures, things he didn't recognize. And at the center of the room, something waited. A chair, old, wooden, faced toward the far wall. He took a cautious step closer, his flashlight flickering, a whisper, soft, barely audible. A breath of sound curling through the basement like a draft. His light flickered again. Something moved in the corner of his vision. And then, the chair spun around. Evan staggered back. The chair was empty. But the air had changed. He wasn't alone down here. The scratching sound returned, slow at first, then faster. The walls seemed to breathe, the claw marks shifting in the dim light. Then, from the farthest corner, something moved. Not an animal, not a person. Something low, crawling, unnatural. A shape emerging from the shadows. A pair of eyes, dull, milky white, fixed on him from the darkness. And then, a whisper, right against his ear. "You should not have opened the door." Evan didn't stay to see what would happen next. He turned and ran, stumbling up the stairs, slamming the hatch shut behind him. The latches, rusted, stiff, refused to lock. Beneath the floor, something thumped against the wood. Hard. Once. Twice. And then, silence. He didn't sleep that night. The whispers didn't return, but when he checked the basement door the next morning, it was locked again. The latches bolted shut, as if they had never been opened. Evan left the cabin a week later. When the next ranger moved in, Evan didn't warn them, because he knew it wouldn't matter. The cabin was old, the basement was older, and whatever was down there, it was still waiting. There are places in Yellowstone where time feels thinner, places where the air is too still, where the trees seem to lean in just a little too much, where, if you listen carefully, you'll hear something whispering just beneath the wind. For centuries, people have told stories about these places. Warnings, really. Passed down from old park rangers, from native tribes who knew better than to disturb the dead, from those who barely escaped with their sanity intact. Some people listen, some don't, and then there are those who seek it out, those who want to find something lurking in the dark. They never expect that something will find them first. The group arrived at the park just after dusk. 4 of them, armed with cameras, voice recorders, and infrared scanners. They weren't professionals, just thrill seekers chasing stories, looking for a viral video, hoping to catch something unnatural. Their target? An old burial ground, long abandoned, barely marked on any map. The legends were clear. No one stays after dark. But they weren't here to listen to warnings. They were here to summon whatever might be waiting. They didn't realize it was already watching. They set up their equipment in a small clearing, just beyond the last faded gravestones. Candles flickered in the cold night air. One of them, Michael, produced a weathered Ouija board, setting it on a flat rock at the center. They joined hands, took a deep breath, and began. At first, nothing happened. The wind rustled the trees, the distant howl of a wolf echoed through the park. Then, the candles flickered violently. A chill swept through the clearing, and the temperature dropped. The planchette moved, not in the slow, hesitant way of someone pushing it. Sharp, deliberate, aggressive. Michael swallowed. "Who are we speaking to?" The board spelled out a single word. "Leave." One of them, Sarah, laughed nervously. "Okay, that's creepy, but we're not leaving. Can you tell us who you are?" The board didn't move this time. Instead, a twig snapped behind them. The group froze. A shape shifted between the trees, tall, shadowed, impossible to make out. And then the whispering started. Not from the board, from the woods. Soft at first, like the wind carrying distant voices. Then closer, louder, all around them. "Leave! Leave! 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 Leave!" The candles snuffed out all at once. The group scrambled back. A gust of wind tore through the clearing, scattering their equipment. A camera toppled, its screen flickering. A heavy thud sounded from the tree line, like something massive had just dropped onto the ground. Then, a shriek. Not human, not animal, something in between. The darkness shifted. A figure stepped forward, not walking, gliding, pale, tattered, faceless. And then, the board exploded. The wooden slab snapped apart as if struck by an invisible force, splinters flying through the air. The planchette spun violently, landing at Michael's feet. Another whisper, right in his ear. "Run!" They did. They grabbed what they could and bolted back to their car. None of them spoke. None of them dared to look back. Only when they reached the safety of the park entrance did they finally catch their breath. Their gear was damaged, their footage mostly corrupted. Except for one thing. When they checked the audio recording, the static had overtaken most of it. But just before the feed cut off, a voice, distorted, inhuman. It whispered one final warning. "Leave now!" The group never returned to the burial ground. They never spoke of what they saw that night. But sometimes, when Michael closes his eyes, he swears he can still hear it, the whispering. Still waiting in the trees, still watching. And next time, it might not let them leave. Yellowstone is a place of beauty, a sanctuary of nature, untouched wilderness, and breathtaking landscapes. But for those who have lived and worked in its depths, those who have seen what lurks beneath the surface, it is something else entirely. It is a place of mystery, a place where the past refuses to rest, a place where something watches from the trees, from the shadows, from the spaces we dare not look too closely at. And if there's one thing we've learned tonight, it's that some doors should never be opened, some calls should never be answered, and some whispers should never be followed. For those who listen too long, who stare too deeply into the abyss, Yellowstone might just stare back. Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this journey into the unexplainable, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more terrifying tales. And if you have your own stories, if you've ever heard whispers in the trees, seen something standing just at the edge of the firelight, or felt eyes on you when you were completely alone, let us know in the comments. Because sometimes the scariest stories are the ones that are true. Stay safe out there, and remember, some things in Yellowstone are better left undiscovered.